Okay, so I'm ready? All right, so I'm just going to dive right in. So, when Danny kind of presented this idea to me, we talked about a couple different concepts, fitness, health, business, and we kind of narrowed it down to my biggest passion, which is kind of bridging the gap between mind, body, and soul health. And I've been, as Danny mentioned, in a lot of different fields of wellness and focused very fitness heavy, very nutrition heavy. And I've kind of dabbled through all of these different things in my personal life and my career. And what my biggest passion now is to really help everybody, but especially women. Obviously, I'm a woman and we have unique things, but just kind of find a place of balance, because I think through society and media and just our current culture of go, 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 a lot of times, not only is there a lot of misinformation about what we should be doing, but there's this real extreme mentality that makes us like all or nothing. And we like go all in and we like kick, all this stuff in once and for all. And we're like, yeah, I'm like working out really consistent. And then maybe a couple weeks later, like we don't work out again for 6 months, or we eat really, really, really healthy or clean for a month or two. And then we fall off track, as people like to say. And it kind of happens in every element of health. And it prevents people from really kind of finding a place that's maintainable. And if something's not maintainable, then it's kind of pointless to even try, right? Like nobody wants to brush their teeth for a week or two and then not brush their teeth. We understand most concepts of health should be consistent and permanent. So I kind of just want to speak to that, finding ways of implementing health that work for you without getting caught up in the hype, without going to extremes and setting yourself up for failure, and without getting burnt out or neglecting one area of your health because you're only focused on this other area, which is another thing that I see a lot, especially when fitness becomes front and center. So throughout this, I welcome any questions, because I love making talks like this interactive and catered to what you guys want to know. But I'm going to start with my whole approach of looking at health as mind, body, soul, and what that even means, because that could mean a million different things to a lot of people, but I'm going to kind of explain my perspective on it and my approach and how I work with people. So mind is pretty easy. Mind is your mental health. Your thoughts that you think on a daily basis is kind of the biggest portion of that, our internal dialogue. What we listen to, whether that's the news or music or television, that actually permeates our brain pretty substantially. And then, of course, that creates our beliefs about ourselves, about the world, and that all kind of encompasses the mind aspect. Then we have our body, which is pretty self-explanatory. That's physical health. That is, are we moving or not? That's what we're putting in our body nutritionally, what we're drinking, what we're eating. What we're putting on our body is a big component of that gets overlooked a lot, but is actually just as equally important to, be really mindful of what you're putting on your body, because that ends up in your system and in your blood. There is obviously the food element to that, exercise, and that kind of encompasses the body. And then the soul, this is the one where people can kind of get hung up on, because it's like, what is the soul? Like, what does that even mean? And again, everyone can kind of have a different interpretation of what that is or what that means. And sometimes people will assume soul is kind of religious based, and it could be for an individual, but it's very separate from any type of religious belief or protocol or system in its essence. And our soul is kind of our inner self, like who we were meant to be in the world, what really makes us feel alive, what's the most important to us. Like you know when something doesn't sit right and it kind of goes against your soul, like who you really are on a deeper level. And what health looks like in that aspect is really nurturing that inner self. Some people even call it an inner child, because it's kind of like our most innocent, the most innocent version of ourselves before we had all these expectations and programs installed in our brains and all these different things that kind of took that away from us as we mature into adults. But I just like to simplify it as your inner self. Like what's not the mind and not the body is the soul. And that is your self-care. There are elements to that are meditation and really being still and turning off the TV and news and kind of just getting quiet and tuning in with yourself and asking yourself, am I happy? Is this the path I want? Am I doing things that make me feel good about my path or my career or my relationships. And a lot of different aspects of soul care, soul health, are just simple acts of like being still and quiet. Like you could use prayer, you could use meditation, journaling, visualization, a hot bath, anything that really nourishes you. Like being out in nature is a really good mind, body, and soul nourishment. So that's just kind of a simple little breakdown to sort of compartmentalize those three aspects of health. And a lot of people, as I mentioned before, will look at health as one-dimensional. And years ago, I've been in the health space for 15 years, and I owned a gym for 8 years. And one of the things that I honed very quickly in my career was I could see how many people would make fitness their number one priority. They would go all in, they would work out, they would eat perfect, they'd hit the gym 7 days a week, and then a month or two later they'd be burnt out, they'd be worn out, they'd maybe have an injury, and they'd either quit, or if they stayed on that path for a longer duration of time, their family relationships kind of suffered, or maybe their work suffered a little bit, because when you take 100% of energy and you put it in one, something else is going to suffer. So if you look at the mind, body, and soul as like 3 jars and you have 100% of yourself, you should be kind of equally pouring into them on a daily, monthly, weekly basis to keep things somewhat balanced. And it's not always going to be perfectly like 33.30%, each time. Like you're going to go through different areas where one can take more priority, but overall, the term that I coined and have still used to this day is kind of using a multifaceted approach to make sure that in pursuing one element of health, you don't sacrifice the other. And that's really important, because when you look at society and you look at a lot of kind of people in the limelight, you can see sort of consistent stories show up, like the business guy who built the 10-figure business and made it to the top, but he neglected his family, or he neglected his health and had a heart attack at 35 years old, or there's so many ways that can show up for individuals because they sacrificed all else to pursue one element. And so I want to kind of talk about I really just sort of explain why it matters to work on all of them, because you don't want one to completely become destroyed, and it can very easily. My own personal story was when I first got into fitness, I started studying and looking at fitness at a very early age. I was just all in, study, train. I got into athletic fitness competitions, and very, very early on, because I sacrificed everything else to do these competitive fitness competitions, I hit a wall not only with my health at a very early age, like 23 years old, nearly became incapacitated because I had stressed my body so hard and trained so overtrained so much that I hit a wall. And it took me several years to actually get my health back in check, to be able to really work the way that I wanted to work. Like, it affected everything. And that was a huge, huge lesson to me that I actually saw a lot in the fitness competition arena. I saw a lot of women and men going through this phase of like 100,000% into one area, and then something happens. And again, it happens in other areas too, when you focus 100% on work and you burn yourself out mentally, and then you hit a wall. Or you neglect self-care, the soul care, and you put all this energy into a path, and 2 or 3 years later you check in with yourself and you're like, I don't even want to do this. Like, this was my family pressuring me to take this path, and it doesn't fit right with my soul. So I think the earlier we can adopt a mentality of sort of working on all of these and nourishing each part of our body, our mind, body, and soul, I think the more likely we are to not hit that detrimental point of breakdown, hitting the wall and not being able to come out of it. And this especially applies in business, whether you intend to be self-employed, whether you want to work for a corporation, whether you want, to be a stay-at-home mom. If you look at your career and how you're prioritizing things, eventually you will only be able to go as far as your self-care and your health will allow. Mental fortitude and the whole hustle mentality, like, that's all fine and good. And when you're younger, you can do that a lot more. Again, I adopted that, and I was just like, no days off, just like push, push, push. And I had all these really extreme mantras of no pain, no gain, and all of that. And eventually my body gave out. So having been an entrepreneur for 10 years and owning multiple businesses, and also having a deep sense of self and like spiritual practice and connection where I feel connected to who I am, I feel at peace, I feel fulfilled in life. I've learned a lot about the importance of pouring into these areas equally and not neglecting them. So it matters a lot in business because you can only be as good in your business as you feel in your personal life. And again, with the example of, say, the corporate CEO who neglected everything else, but he was really, really successful. Some might say, well, it was probably necessary for him to have that success to neglect those other areas. And that may be true. I mean, sometimes I think that, our most incredible, influential people, they kind of are one-dimensional and they are very successful in one area, and maybe they don't have that healthy, balanced life. But if you are somebody who wants enriching relationships in your life, you want to feel at peace with what you're doing, you want to physically feel energized, that's a big one, without energy we can't do anything, and you want to have a positive mindset where you can think clearly and create and serve whoever you're going to serve in your business or, in your work, then you want to make sure you're pouring into all of these areas. So I'm going to just stop just right there. I think this is the chat box up here. I want to see if anybody has any questions or feedback on what I've said so far. I want to make sure I'm kind of explaining everything in a way that's resonating for you guys, and see if you have any questions so far.
I think you're doing amazing. Hey, Holly.
Hi.
I'm Jasmine.
Hi, Jasmine.
I think you're doing an amazing job. I'm so all in. I'm taking notes. And it's very interesting to me because that's what I'm working on, because I teach yoga and I just love everything you're talking about.
Oh.
That's all I wanted to say. Keep going.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Jasmine.
You're welcome.
Okay, so now that all that is kind of clear, I really want to talk about how this shows up in your work. Some of it's self-explanatory. Again, like if you don't have energy, you cannot show up and work. If you're physically in pain, then you cannot show up and work. And another part of my career was actually massage therapy, and I worked on a lot of athletes and manually working on people. And because I overextended myself in even that area, there were several years where I had to completely cut that out of my business entirely because I physically could not. I pushed too much, and that's very common with body workers and stuff, is they're all in and they have that energy at first, but then they burn out. And so obviously it's very logical to look at the physical aspect. If you're doing any kind of work that uses your physical body, you need to take care of that physical body because it is your most valuable asset. It is your moneymaker. And movement, maintaining physical strength in a way that really feels good for you and not overdoing, is really important. As is nutrition, and really just making sure you're fueling your body with whole natural foods as much as possible, clean, pure water, not overdoing the caffeine, being mindful of inflammatory foods, like gluten is a big inflammatory food, which can promote arthritis and pain and different things. So any type of repetitive movement, whether it's cutting hair and your arms up here, doing massage, body work, or working in a factory, repetitive movements are really, really hard on the body. And they can create imbalances in really big degrees. When I did bodywork therapy, hairstylists were actually the first population that I worked with, and I was astonished to learn that there is a syndrome that's very popular with hairstylists where they will literally, because they're using their arm so much, all of this gets so contracted that it compresses the nerve. It's called thoracic outlet syndrome, which basically is a really fancy medical term for everything's too tight. And the medical world approaches that as they go in and they literally cut out part of the rib to create more space so that that nerve can have blood flow. From a bodywork massage therapist standpoint, we would go in, release the tension, because normally it was here, and then show them certain exercises of building the back of the shoulder so that it's balanced out. So these are things that, depending on what industry you're in, you really want to take the time straight out of the gate to study and learn, because there's a lot of people who have gone before us and who have experienced things, and we can learn before we get to that breakdown point. which is the smartest thing to do to, again, protect our most valuable asset, is our body, if we're using our body in our work. And most of us are to some degree, even if it's not directly. We use our hands to type if you work online or anything like that. And these all present certain imbalances that need to be addressed and need to be accounted for and navigated very intentionally and thoughtfully with, again, simple things like stretching, movement, strengthening, and balancing. As a body worker and personal trainer, that was my big thing, is always helping the body become balanced, because repetitive movements set you up for imbalances. So that is how, the importance of physical health in your work, but then mental health as well. So most of you have probably experienced at some point in your life, like waking up out of bed and stumbling straight into the corner and busting your toe. And it's like, that is the tone that was set for your day. And then your coffee was too hot and you burnt your tongue, or you spilt it on you. And then you hit every single red light on the way to work. And then your first, client, if you were working, called out, or just all these different things. Like, we've all experienced this cascade, like domino effect, where we're like, this day sucks. Like, what is going on? And we've also experienced the opposite of that, where we wake up and the sun's shining and everything feels good, and we go to the grocery store and somebody calls us pretty, and it's like just all these little things, just kind of like, it feels like you're living in the twilight zone, because it's just like the best day ever. You hit every green light, somebody drops a $5 bill and tells you to keep it. I mean, all these little things pop up, and you wouldn't think that you have any control over that. You're like, well, that's just coincidence. That's like luck of the draw, like things happen. Which is true to an extent, but there is also some really interesting science called quantum physics and something called the law of attraction, which maybe some of you are familiar with, maybe it's a brand new concept, but it does state that basically like attracts like. Our thoughts and the way we're thinking and feeling on a physical level have a physical vibration that can be measured. The more positive our thoughts, the better we feel, the more we will actually physically, and this is scientifically proven, attract more of those things to us, because it's like a magnet. It like attracts like. And so that's kind of an explanation as to why when you start straight out of the gate with a negative mindset, or something bad happens and it puts you in those really low junky frequencies of, this day sucks and I'm already running late and I know that this person's going to be mad at me and this isn't going to work out. When we allow those thoughts to repetitively go on and on and on and on and on, and we don't take pause or inventory of them and intentionally shift them in a more positive direction, that is how those domino effect negative days turn into 2 days, 3 days, weeks, months. And we've probably all experienced one person who's like a walking, breathing example of both of these. Like the person that seems like they're always lucky and everything's just always working out for them. They always have opportunities and people like them. And then there's like the person that just drains the life out of a room when they walk in, because they're always negative. They've always got something negative to say. They're always complaining about something. They're always focused on the worst that can happen or the worst that did happen, and they're just kind of a drag to be around. So this is where the mind, the conscious mind, and the mentality comes in, because if you can imagine being those two people that I just described, the negative Nelly or the positive person, imagine which one of those people is going to be more successful in their career, who's going to have happier relationships, more fulfilling friendships, who's going to be more prone to opportunities and advancements. Like, just imagine how just that mindset, like, who would you want to talk to? If you needed someone to do something with, like, who would you choose? And so our mindset matters a lot. And now here's where I'm going to say a disclaimer, because I started learning these concepts and studying these concepts about 15 years ago, before I started my first business. And like everything, like I started this talk with, it can be taken to extreme. So you are not meant to look at every single thing as positive. And there are some philosophies and teachers in the law of attraction, quantum physics space that kind of take it to that, and it will not serve you. So if this is an idea that interests you, or you're like, well, I want to, find out how I can intentionally bring more positivity into my life and more positive things, just know that everyone has a little bit of a different take on this, and my take is that yes, we are responsible for a lot. We can influence a lot in our lives, but it does not mean that if we are experiencing something traumatic or really sad that we should just try to bypass that emotion and then be like, oh yeah, everything's fine, there's always a positive in this, because that will actually be detrimental. So with a mindset, and I'll share a little bit about my first business. So actually a little bit about my full story so you guys can kind of get where I'm coming from and how this stuff actually shows up in real life. I had a very unique upbringing, a very abusive childhood, so much to the point that I actually left home at 16 because I knew I was like, I'm not going to survive if I stay here. I ran away with nothing. I was a missing person for a couple of years, like literally hiding out, trying to just survive. I was waitressing, making sandwiches, and working at McDonald's at 18 years old. And my big dream was music. Like I was a singer-songwriter, I played guitar and everything, and that was my big dream, to move to Nashville, do the whole American Nashville music dream. And I did that. I actually moved to Nashville with $80 in my pocket, the truck that I had just bought, and all of my music and songs in the cab, and was like, this is what I'm gonna do. And I was homeschooled my whole life as well. So I grew up in a very unconventional environment that did not really support my belief in myself. I struggled with an eating disorder very early on, and I had a lot of self-doubt, limitations, and negative programs that had kind of been instilled in me from the get-go. And that really impacted my ability to pursue music because deep down inside I lacked so much confidence, and I was so consumed with self-doubt and fear, and nobody had kind of given me the tools to be confident or to pursue the goals that I wanted to pursue or anything like that. And so I did music for several years, and I was bartending, and was still into fitness at that time because at that point all I wanted to do was be skinny like any 20-year-old probably at the time. But I started to fall more in love with fitness and nutrition in a more holistic health kind of way, not just a superficial, I want to be a size 2 way. And so over the years that evolved a little bit more. And by the time I was 23, I was so sick of going into smoky bars and serving people alcohol till 3 or 4 in the morning and then having to walk through dark alleys to get to my car. Like I was so over all of that. And around a year or two before that, I had started reading like success books. I started learning about the law of attraction, and these little seeds of I can change my reality if I truly want to and if I commit to it started being planted. And that was kind of where my obsession with self-development and nourishing kind of my mental aspect really stemmed from. And so I started getting this idea that I wanted to be a business owner. I wanted to work for myself. I was tired of checking in to, clocking in to make other people money and dealing with people I didn't want to deal with. And I started kind of brewing this dream. About 2 or 3 months into really talking about this, I had no plan. I had no idea. I literally was just, this sounds so like movie cliche, but at the bar I would like sketch out little ideas of my logo on the bar napkins. And I had this idea for Kaizen concepts. Kaizen means constant and never-ending improvement. And I was like, that's the name that I want, my business to be, and I want to help people get healthy and fit and learn how to eat. And I just had this dream that just kept brewing, but I had no concept of how. I had no college degree. I had no investors. I had no clue, like nothing. And I was self-sufficient, my family, I was kind of estranged from them. I had no boyfriend to help me out. I was completely on my own. And the way that I was able to walk into the bar one night and say, I don't want this anymore, without having the plan and all the skills, was because my mindset had grew to a point where I knew I could figure it out. I believed so completely in myself and what was available to me, that the knowledge and the tools were out there, that other people had started business, and been successful. And I just cultivated this inner belief in myself. And I was pouring into my mind every single day. This is where you didn't have Audible, you had literally CDs. And in my truck, I had all these success CDs, and I just poured in, until eventually that drowned out all of the negative fear, self-doubt, I can't do it, I don't have money, like I don't know anything about business. It drowned it out, and then I believed in myself. And so one day I literally walked in, and my boss was a cool guy, like I didn't have any problems with him. I finished my shift, but I was like, I'm not coming back. And he's like, what? I was like, I'm just done. No plan, nothing. But I had the belief and I had the mindset. And that was at 23 years old. I started my first business. I started the business and ran it for about a year, figuring things out as I went. I re-enrolled in school. That's when I went to bodywork, and I continued to just hone my craft and build my mind, my business skills. I definitely overdid the body part because that was kind of like my drug of choice, if you will. I really, when I was stressed, I would want to just work out very extreme and excessively. And the soul part didn't come in until a couple years later, when the overwork, the overstress, and all of that kind of started to make me feel a little empty. I was like, I'm working, I'm successful, I'm helping other people, but I wasn't nourishing myself the way that I should. So the mindset part, I share that story to let you guys know that with the right mindset, it's like a garden. And if any of you are familiar with the basic anatomy of a plant, you know that plants need a few things, and they need them in the right doses and in the right amounts. And they'll thrive, they'll grow, they'll flourish. And if they don't have those things, they will very quickly shrivel and die. And most of us put in a lot of negativity, whether it's from people in our lives or from the media, from news to, kind of movies and music and entertainment. And then we don't intentionally put in anything positive. We don't cultivate that success mindset, that positivity, that what's possible, like what can I do? We don't nourish that part of ourselves, and that's kind of our number one downfall. We don't have that inner confidence. Like, so many people have said, like, how in the world did you start a business at 23 years old? Or how have you traveled the world by yourself? Or how have you done XYZ? And I can say that it started at that 21, 22 time frame, when I was like that age, when I decided that I was going to intentionally nourish my mind and my mindset, number one. And I still do that to this day. Audible, YouTube videos, motivational speeches, podcasts, there's so much information out there that we can intentionally fuel our minds on a daily basis, and it should be on a daily basis, because our default can be very negative. It can be the first domino in that I stubbed my toe out of, first thing out of bed. And the next thing you know, you look at your life and you're like, this isn't what I wanted. Like, what happened? And it was never one thing. It was all the little choices and thoughts that you kind of repeated over time. And then you're not anywhere close to where you actually want to be in life. So the mindset is so huge, and you have 100% control over that. And you should intentionally be nourishing that on a daily basis. Again, there's so many free resources out there. Like, when I started, I still have this, the old school CD books. Like, it's full. It's like this big, full of all these like success books and stuff that I would get on CD. Now my Audible collection, I literally have thousands of books there, because it's the easiest. Like, in your pocket, you have hundreds of books right there ready to go. So I think I have probably nailed home my point about how important mindset is, and what the right mindset can actually bring about in your life, and why it should be the number one tool, professionally, personally, anything. Because this also affected my personal relationships. It helped me set really firm boundaries. It helped me learn to communicate. Because if you don't have confidence in who you are as a person and what your value is, it's going to affect your business a lot. It's going to affect what you tolerate in your personal life and what you allow in personal relationships. It affects everything. The more confidence and the more positive your mindset can be, the better all of those things will be. And then the physical body, what I want to touch on with that is, it doesn't have to be extreme. And I know I started this talk with kind of laying that foundation, is most people get in these extremes. It's like they want to go P90X for 60, 90 days, and then it's nothing else. And what I would encourage from the physical health aspect is, I've studied exercise physiology, kinesiology, bodywork therapy, advanced orthomolecular nutrition, and all these other fancy words that you guys don't care about. But I can reduce 15 years of collective research and knowledge and study to like 2 or 3 sentences. And it still applies. Every new thing that I learn, every new book or new study that comes out, it still falls back to these 2 principles. Try to move your body frequently, just move. Literally, the word movement covers it all. Weight training is great because it strengthens your body and it goes back to that balancing your body, but just moving, whether that is yoga, walking, gardening, even cleaning your house counts as movement, but just move your body in a way that feels really good to you. And that's all. Again, weight training, I'm really, really partial to that from the strength side. But that is a little different than just the generalized benefits for your mental, physical health with just moving. And walks outside and getting fresh air. I remember when I first started in fitness and people would say, well, yeah, I exercise, I walk a couple days. And this is when I was in my very egotistical, competitive athlete kind of mindset that wasn't so, not one I was proud of. But people would tell me about walking and I would just kind of roll my eyes. I was like, oh, that's so not exercise. Like, if you aren't gasping for air and sore for 5 days, it's not exercise. And like, I laugh at myself now because walking is one of the things that I prioritize over everything else because it helps de-stress me without overstressing me. It stimulates my creativity. It helps move my lymphatic fluid, which is your body's detoxification system. It does so much. And it's like the most natural human thing we can do is just move our bodies and walk. So it really boils down to just being simple. You can add weight training, you can do other different things, but don't go too much, especially too much too soon, because you will likely injure yourself, you will get burnout, you will cause negative effects by doing too much. And when it all comes down to a physiological level, exercise is stress. Clean, plain, and simple is exercise is a stress. And in our modern day world, we have stress like way up here. Like, we have so much stress that we have to be really mindful about not over stressing our systems with excessive 90-minute classes 7 days a week, because again, we will hit a wall. Eventually our systems will deteriorate and we'll be digging ourselves out of that hole and really having to come back on a bigger level if we overdo it. So keep it really, really, really simple with movement. Start small, dedicate a couple, times a week. If you like walking every day, that's not really something you can overdo, but just keep it simple. So all of the exercise physiology and complicated science stuff can be reduced to move your body. Literally that sentence, just move your body, breathe, get some sweat going. And from the nutritional side, it's almost ridiculous that the science and the years of evidence and as advanced as nutrition can be, that it can be reduced down to this simple statement. But again, I've got the clinical background and the scientific part covered. I've been there. I know it inside and out. And I can wholeheartedly say that the number one thing that you can do and should know and implement in your life from a nutritional perspective is eat whole foods. What that means is shop the perimeters of the grocery store and get foods that are in their natural state, that don't come in a box with an ingredient list. If you stick to that, and it's not that you can't combine foods, like obviously if you wanted to make a stir fry, that would be several, vegetables and stuff in, but instead of adding a sauce that's a processed food that has 14 ingredients, additives, preservatives, and all these chemicals, you use salt and pepper, which are whole foods in their natural state. And then you have this whole food collection. Maybe you add chicken or something like that to it, which is also a whole food, rather than processed sausage, which is a packaged food, nitrates, preservatives, all these other ingredients, and basically a bunch of minced meat from God knows where. So you can see the difference between something that comes in a package, that has an ingredients list, that has a long shelf life. Those are the foods that you want to stay away from as much as possible. And to not go to the extremes or kind of perpetuate any fear-based models of eating, because I believe very firmly that the mindset aspect applies to nutrition as much as it does anything. You want to have a positive relationship with food and not be paranoid. But to help with that, there's a rule that I go by called the 80-20 rule. And it's literally that 80% of the time you're doing your best to make good, healthy choices, to eat clean, whole foods in their natural state, cook from home if you can, or just make better choices going out. And 20% of the time you're eating the cupcake. You're having the margarita if you want. You're finding foods that really make you feel good or that you really enjoy and you're intentionally choosing those versus just kind of winging it on and off throughout your whole life. So the 80-20 rule helps a lot, because when people start thinking of eating healthy or changing their lifestyle in some way, they get very overwhelmed if you tell them, well, that's a bad food, or you can't eat that, or you'll never eat cake again. Best way to ensure somebody will eat cake on the spot is to tell them they cannot eat cake. And I know you guys can probably relate to that, especially if you've been on a diet before and then you find yourself, like, after a couple days eating the number one thing you swore you would never eat again. It's just human nature. And our bodies are smart, and they know that you can't go from eating this way to this way overnight and expect to not have cravings and insufficiencies and stuff like that. So eating whole, fresh, natural foods about 80% of the time will be so beneficial and valuable for you. And it's not always going to be perfect. You don't have to calculate this 80%, just kind of as a general rule to follow. Sometimes it's 30% for me if I'm on holiday or at a friend's house or something. Like, I might have a 30% of eating what I want. Sometimes I go weeks without, feeling like I am missing out if I'm not eating cake. So it will fluctuate a little bit. You'll have flexibility, but it's a great rule to kind of follow if you're wanting to nourish your physical body in a nutritious way that keeps you energized, keeps your body strong, keeps your mind feeling good and energized, and helps with everything else. 80-20, eat whole foods, move your body. It's like literally that simple. Before I touch on the final one with kind of just elaborating on the soul care part and the self-care part, I wanted to see if there's any questions about that, because this tends to be where people have the most questions, especially in the nutrition part. So if you guys have any questions, now would be a great time to shoot them out. Okay. Looks like no questions. Let's see. Double check that. Okay, cool. All right, so the final element is the soul care, the self-care, and this one I feel like in the last couple years, what I've seen in the health industry is this huge trend towards self-care. 15 years ago when I started, social media wasn't what it was, but the idea of really taking care of ourselves and kind of women empowerment and self-love and body positivity, there was a lot of those elements that did not exist. And I am so glad that they exist in this space now, because I think it has reframed a lot of these negative extremes, especially in the health space, because the health space can get spun so negatively, where it's like trying to force women into be a certain size or to look a certain way. And I do not subscribe to that at all. I've always been very, very pro your individual body, loving your body where it's at and what it can do, and like not trying to subscribe to some Glamour magazine's idea of beauty, size, or anything like that. And so I love seeing that this self-care, self-love message has really spread so far and wide, because that was what I always made the foundation of my programs. And this can kind of be reduced to a single quote that I would always say, which is that you can never hate yourself into change. You have to love yourself into change. And a lot of people, whether it's exercise or trying to eat a certain way, or even trying to advance in their career, we're sort of conditioned, again, back to that default negative state, to think that if we berate ourselves enough, if we beat ourselves up enough, if we talk negatively enough, that maybe it will trigger some sort of like incentive to change. And it doesn't work that way. Psychology proves that it doesn't work that way. Like anecdotal personal experience proves that it doesn't work that way, because a lot of people try to approach any kind of change from a negative of you're not good enough and you won't be good enough until you do XYZ or you eat this way, which is why the 80-20 rule is so helpful, because it gives you flexibility to be human, to make mistakes, to try your best, but have that fluidity of it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be extreme all or nothing, or, the opposite. So this idea of self-love, I think, is something that is probably the most familiar to a lot of people. Again, because it's shared so far and wide. There's so many influencers out there that are embracing different ideas of beauty and just all kinds of different elements of loving yourself and body positivity and nourishing yourself. I love that. It makes me very, very, very happy. But I think there is a little bit of a limitation on where that self-care goes, because most people kind of think self-care, bubble baths, eating some chocolate in bed, getting your nails done, like self-care, that's self-care. And obviously, if you're a woman, that's probably more relevant to you. I don't know what guys consider self-care. Maybe, I have no idea. I can't even pretend to know what guys think is self-care. But for women, like, those are the things that kind of pop up, is, like self-care. I'm going to go treat myself to get a massage or get my nails done. And those 100% are things that can be categorized as self-care, and they should be. They're wonderful, taking time out for yourself. But what's deeper than that? What's beyond the superficial, this tastes good, this feels good, this is relaxing, this makes me look, pretty and makes me feel good on a superficial level. And that's where the soul piece really comes in, because self-care and self-love, I think, are a little bit more on the superficial and logical. Again, we know, hey, if you go do something nice for yourself, that's an act of self-care and will probably boost your confidence a little bit. But what's deeper than that is the soul aspect. And that is, again, that inner landscape. What's going on behind the scenes? Like, what are you really feeling about in life, in your relationships? Are you fulfilled? Do you have a sense of peace? Do you have a sense of happiness? Do you really enjoy life? Like, are you feeling connected to yourself, to a higher power if you identify with one? Just what are you actually feeling on a daily basis? Because without this piece, you can have the right mindset, you can be crushing it in work, advancing in your career, you can have the right approach to health and fitness, you're doing the 80-20, eating whole foods, hitting the gym in a perfect balanced way, and all of that, and you can go through years and years and years of your life kind of just feeling dull, like never really super unhappy, never hitting that rock bottom depressed, but never really feeling that like, I love my life, I feel alive, I'm happy to get up in the morning, I feel fulfilled, this is my purpose, I really just, am happy to be the person that I am doing what I'm doing. And obviously, no matter how well you're eating, how good your mindset is, that's probably not the life that you want for yourself. So again, like I said in the very beginning, learning as soon in life as you can to implement these tools of nurturing and making sure you're taking care of all these elements will help you live the most kind of like purpose-driven, happy, fulfilled, healthy life on all levels. And that is why I am so passionate about talking about all of these collectively and how they all affect your life. And so with the soul piece, like I also said, sometimes people interpret that to be religion-based, and it's not at all, because I 100% have a non-denominational approach to spirituality. I'm very fluid in that respect. I've studied a lot of different religions, and I love it all, basically. So it doesn't have to be identified with any sort of religion in any way. It's your connection to yourself, what's in here. And one of the best ways to connect to that, because there are people that go through their whole life, they don't even have a concept of what's beyond the mind and the body. Like they live in those two areas. And when you ask them what their soul is, they're like, I don't know, is that like what leaves when you die? Like they don't really have a conscious awareness or explanation of what that actually might be. And one of the easiest things to start with is just taking a little bit of time to be really quiet. Turn the phone off, log out of social media, turn the TV off, disconnect from what your family might be suggesting that you do, or your partner, or your friends, or what you thought you wanted to do. Just kind of connecting to your soul is literally like just pushing everything out of the equation, because we live so kind of inundated with everyone else's thoughts and ideas and expectations and pressures and everything. And being still and taking a little bit of intentional time to just breathe, connect, and like just be with yourself. It sounds so boring at first, and it can feel really boring at first. It likely will. This is always the area that people are most resistant to implementing, actually, when I work with them, is they'll change their diet and they'll do the exercise, and yeah, positive thinking, that sounds cool. But you tell them to go sit in a room by themselves, with nothing else for 5 minutes, and they're like, eh. It's actually a really scary, intimidating idea to think about just being with themselves. What thoughts are going to come up? Like, you kind of have to face what might be going on internally. You can't just busy yourself away from it, which a lot of us use busyness as a distraction to kind of tune out what's going on internally. So this is so powerful because we get our greatest insights. We really connect to what our heart wants and what's really making us feel good. We get a lot of clarity in this. My meditation practice as a business owner is literally like my number one. My meditation and my sleep. I'm so protective of those two things because the minute either one of those things gets interrupted or starts to be skipped or it's not consistent, my energy goes down, my mood goes down, my mind shit goes down, like everything just sort of domino effect again. And then I find myself not being very productive, not being very nice to my husband. I'm grumpy, I'm, not being my best self basically when that or sleep is interrupted. And so that says a lot about how important that is, given that my entire life is built around, all these elements of health. But I put that much stock in just sitting alone with myself and being quiet so that I can kind of tune in and make sure I'm acting and showing up in the world the way I want to every day. Journaling is another one. I go through phases with journaling. Some people love journaling. Like that, they will just sit and journal their inner thoughts. They will, get a lot of clarity. They'll express themselves. They'll write, if they're mad, they'll write whatever they're feeling. And, they didn't have to verbalize it to somebody. Some people love journaling. I go through phases with it. So this is the other thing, is a lot of people are very individual with this whole soul stuff. There are some modalities of meditation. Meditation has a lot of different versions. For example, my husband loves mindfulness meditation, which is literally where you're just sitting there breathing and doing nothing else. I'm a little bit more like proactive. I like to do things. So I'll do different meditations where I do certain breaths. Some of them are fast, some of them are slow, or I will chant like mantras. And it gives me something for my mind to kind of be occupied with. And so I'm being still and I'm being quiet, but I'm also doing something. And there's a lot of different ways that can, be beneficial for certain people if they just find sitting still is just too much. He loves it. Some people love it. Some people work better with different types. So this is kind of where the flexibility and experimentation part comes in. Number one, you should never judge something on the first try. And this goes back to nutrition a lot and fitness, because if you've never worked out a day in your life and you go work out, you're probably going to feel like crap. And you're going to be like, this is not all it's cracked up to be. I don't know what this runner's high thing is about. This feels terrible. And it takes about a week or two for your body to kind of adjust and those endorphins to kick in and the pain to not be so, the muscle soreness not be so severe. And then all of a sudden it's like a total shift. Then you love the way you feel after a workout and you want to continue to do it. Same thing with food. If you're used to eating processed chemical-based food that has a lot of addictive, properties in it, you go try to eat an apple and it's going to be like, not seeing it. This tastes like crap. But give it a week or two and your taste buds will literally change and adjust to the new foods, and you'll actually start craving healthy foods. And when you go back to some of those, especially chemical heavy foods, it will taste like chemicals and you'll be like, oh, I can't believe I used to drink this or eat this. A lot of people do that if they consume a lot of soda and then they stop and then they try like a couple months later and they can't believe that they used to drink 8 cans of Coke a day or something like that. So you have to experiment and try different things, but don't judge it based on the first response or, your first initial reaction. And meditation is one too. Again, a lot of people, I'll give them meditation practices or suggest a YouTube video and they do it once and they're like, oh, I tried that. That was terrible. And I'm like, you got to give it a minute. Like if your mind is so used to being busy, we got a cell phone, we got TV, we got, 20 different things going. It's going to feel very foreign and uncomfortable to suddenly just like sit and be quiet for 5 minutes. And start small. Start with 5 minutes. Just get in the practice of doing it every day. Sit, breathe, put on some music. There's a lot of apps and stuff that can help. Free guided meditations on YouTube. So many free resources for all of this stuff. And just give it a week or two and see how you feel. Like try the journaling, try the meditation. I also love visualization, which is a great way to accelerate your goals. And so quite simply, visualization is say I want to go on this trip to Greece, and I've, thought about that for a really long time. Well, visualization would be kind of meditating, but intentionally visualizing me in Greece and visualizing where I want to go in Greece and what it would feel like and the food that I would eat and laying on the beach and taking pictures. I would really kind of put myself in the feeling state of what it would be like to be in Greece. And the benefit of that is tied back to the law of attraction thing, because when you imagine something, your brain and your body changes the frequency to the same exact state as if you were really there doing it. And then you attract what supports that. So if I wanted to be in a relationship and I wasn't, I could visualize being in a relationship and actually get my body to have the frequency of what it would be like to be in a happy relationship, which is a lot more productive and conducive to me attracting the right person to have a relationship than walking around being like, guys suck, I'm never going to get in a relationship, like, I'm just unlucky. So it kind of goes back to that visualization, that's a hard word for me right now, is a really powerful tool to help raise your vibration and get you in a more positive state so that you can bring in more of that specific aspect. So prayer is another one, and prayer is definitely one that's very classically seen as something religious. For me and my background and the way I approach spirituality and mindfulness and soul work, prayer is just communicating with something, even myself sometimes. I love the quote that prayer is talking to God, meditation is listening. And you could replace God with the universe or whatever, or you could just, use it in any context that you want. So as with all of this stuff, there's the flexibility to make this your own, to make it resonate for you, to do this in a way that really feels right and makes you feel happy and fulfilled and like, yes, that makes sense to me. So there's a lot of different tools that you guys can experiment with, a lot of different options. And collectively in all of this, I would say my takeaways are this. Start pouring into these areas, all three of them, at least a couple minutes a day. Like write out a schedule it in intentionally like you would anything else, like a doctor's appointment or your work. Put it on the calendar and just start trying to show up every single day and do just a little bit. Use free resources because they are endless. They are, again, the stuff that is available out there for free is just mind-blowing. I mean, I even have a podcast. It's like we have access to share and consume so much knowledge these days. And to not take advantage of that is like such a waste. So use the free resources. Take a balanced approach of progress, not perfection. Think of the 80-20 rule. So if you set a goal to meditate for 5 minutes every day for 7 days and you make 5, consider that a win. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just keep showing up and trying to build the positive habits. Try to move your body in a way that feels good, but not too much. It doesn't have to be crazy. Give yourself grace and compassion, and make sure that through everything else that you're focusing on, you're taking that time to tune in with yourself, see what you might need internally, professionally, psychologically, spiritually, tune in and connect, and enjoy the process. That's kind of my closing note, is all of this stuff, when you take the pressure and the stress and this like rigid idea of what any of this has to look like away, it actually becomes really fun and enjoyable to implement these different habits and tools into your life. And again, it will change the trajectory and the happiness and the fulfillment of your entire life, and it will affect every single element. Your business, your personal lives, your health, your ability to excel. Every single part is going to be affected by this. So I hope you guys try some of these little ideas. I hope this maybe sparks some inspiration for you. I hope you're going to experiment and, dive in and see how you can improve your mind, body, and soul. And I think that is really all that I've got, which looks like we're right at the hour. So I guess I will open all this up for some questions again and see if you guys have anything you want to share, whether it's a question or an insight, if a light bulb went off, or a story or experience. Feel free to share with me now.
Hey, it's Jasmine again. I wanted to know if you have like an IG, because I don't have Facebook, but do you have like a IG that you like give off encouragement things Whatever, because I'll add you.
Yeah. So across all platforms, I am Spiritual Fit Chick. So IG, if you connect with me there, it'll take you to my website, my Facebook, kind of all the different things that I have, my YouTube, my podcast, it's all right there. So yeah, Spiritual Fit Chick is where you can find me.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for coming to talk to us. I appreciate it and I enjoyed it. I think you have a beautiful soul and have really good energy. And I could tell that as soon as you started talking.
Aw, well, thank you. That was very, very sweet.
I wanted to thank you too. I really liked your whole thing.
Awesome. Thank you guys. I appreciate that. All right. So if there's no questions or anything that I can help clarify, as I just said, Spiritual Fit Chick kind of takes you to all my tools and resources. I've got some different free options and stuff. I even have a 7-day free program that you guys can use that takes you through all these little steps for 7 days. So reach out if you have any questions, connect with me there. Let me know if you are connecting. I'd love to know who you are when I get a new follower. And yeah, I look forward to seeing where this takes you guys.
Thank you so much, Holly.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.